could not very well have shared a Jane Austen's Heroines Tag and of course not share a Jane Austen's Heroes Tag. Happy Jane Austen July, friends. I cannot wait to talk about books in regard to some of our favorite Jane Austen heroes. Hello friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Haley and I am a Christian wife, homeschooling mother of 3, out to redeem my very own literary education, which means I'm reading a ton of classic literature and now have an annual tradition to participate in Jane Austen July. I recently did the Jane Austen Heroines Tag that was created by Anne from In Search of Wonder, and that was so much fun that bookish Kelley and I both decided that there needed to be a Jane Austen's Heroes Tag as well. Now, there was already one tag kind of like this floating around on YouTube, but that tag had to deal with not only some of the heroes, but some of the side characters that were males that maybe weren't heroes, like Mr. Collins and Mr. Willoughby, which is absolutely fun. But we wanted a heroes tag solely dedicated to all of Jane Austen's male heroes in her novels. So, in collaboration with Kelley, we are going to dive right into the prompts. The first 2 prompts are the 2 heroes from Pride and Prejudice. And number 1, of course, is Mr. Darcy. And that prompt is a book you thought you wouldn't like, but ended up loving. This is a book I read, I think, last fall. And I was just going to check a classics box, to be perfectly honest. And that is A Study in Scarlet, a Sherlock Holmes story written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I'll be honest, I was just checking a box. I wanted to try mystery. I had never read Sherlock Holmes before, and I just wanted to give it a try. But I was hooked by the story. Hook, line, and sinker. I know that Sherlock Holmes is in some ways not necessarily a detective novel, because Sherlock Holmes, while he is a detective, kind of comes up with things that the reader couldn't have figured out themselves, because he kind of works cases backwards with his deductive reasoning style of detective work. However, I found that to be fascinating to see how he tied all the loose ends up of the story in the end. And A Study in Scarlet is where you begin with Sherlock Holmes, because that is where you meet Sherlock Holmes through the eyes of his trusty companion, Dr. Watson. They're both kind of looking for a roommate. They find each other, and then Dr. Watson follows Sherlock Holmes on his crazy mystery adventures. I loved it. I didn't expect to love it, and I really need to read another Sherlock Holmes this fall. Prompt number 2, of course, is then Mr. Bingley, and this prompt is a feel-good book that you love despite it not being very deep. And I don't have the physical copy of this book on hand because I've loaned the whole series out to my mother-in-law, but this book is called To Wager Her Heart. It is the 2nd novel in the Belmead Plantation series, written by Tamara Alexander, who is a Christian historical fiction author. Now, the series all takes place within the context of Belmead Plantation, a real place that you can go and visit in Tennessee. And all of the different books deal with different subjects, but this 2nd book specifically kind of has a marriage of convenience of a woman whose father is dying. His final wish, basically, when he comes across this good-hearted Irishman who is trying to buy land, but no one will sell it to him because during that time, a lot of people had a lot of discrimination against Irishmen too. So he kind of unveils to him and his daughter that he will sell him this land and he will let her still have the land if they get married. So, and they do. But what I liked about it, surprisingly, is that our heroine was reluctant because she was discriminating against him as an Irishman. And to watch her change and grow, because this book takes place just post-Civil War, it deals with a lot of topics. And it's not super, super deep. It can kind of maybe sort of be. But Tamara Alexander to me is that Christian fiction author that I like when I just want a really good fun story that has some pretty good ideas. I usually learn something about history. It's got some good faith elements, but it maybe isn't as in-depth as a classic. But that's just one of my favorite one of hers. And all of her historical fiction series are great and so much fun, especially if you like that Civil War era in history. And a lot of them take place in real life places that you can actually visit. So there's that too. And first up is prompt number 3, which is Mr. Edward Ferrars. And this is a book you thought was one thing, but it turned out to be another. And this is not the first nor the last time I will talk about this book on my channel. However, I think it matters. I think knowing what this book is going into it can completely change the way you read it. And that is, of course, Wuthering Heights, which I did also talk about on the Jane Austen Heroes Tag. However, this is absolutely a book that I went into it thinking it was a romance because I had heard Heathcliff and Cathy just multiple times together as a couple, and I thought it meant that they were some great love story. That is not what Wuthering Heights is. It is a revenge story. These people are vengeful and villainous, and they do terrible things. And you need to know that before you read it, because if you think it's a love story and you go into it like I did and realize that it's not, you're going to be a little bit shocked and a little bit maybe confused. I had to read it again immediately after reading it just to figure out my thoughts on it. But after the second reading, I felt totally different and could appreciate this for the type of story that it is. That's a revenge story, not a love story, but it's still great, and I would highly encourage you to read it this fall if you're looking for something very atmospheric and a little bit terrifying, but you know, not too bad. This is a great, gripping story. But you'll hate all the characters, but you're supposed to. So just know that going into it. And of course, our prompt number 4 is going to be our other Sense and Sensibility hero, and that is going to be Colonel Brandon, who is one of my favorite Jane Austen heroes, just because of his loyalty and his faithfulness and constancy and devotion to Marianne, even though she might have been a bit undeserving of it. However, this prompt number 4, is a book or series you will always love and defend. This is very fitting because it is Jane Austen July, and I am sneaking in one Jane Austen book into this tag, and that is because it is one that I do feel the need to come to the defense of, and I will always love it. That is Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, of course. This is my second favorite Jane Austen, right after Pride and Prejudice, though I don't think it's fair to compare any of Jane Austen's other works to Pride and Prejudice, so if you took that one out, this would be my number 1 favorite. However, pretty much everyone else hates it, and it's at the bottom of their ranking of Jane Austen, but I love it. Most people hate this book because Fanny is not your typical heroine. However, I like that about her. She might not be full of just vitality and wit and humor, but her virtue makes her a star for me in this book. She is always prudent, always constant in her affection, right in her morals. She is the only character, although nobody in the whole novel really sees her or pays attention to her, that sees everything else clearly for what it is. And I love her for that. I actually really appreciated reading a story about a character who was shy and sickly, which just isn't the norm. So I like the uniqueness of Mansfield Park, and I will always come to its defense as a really great kind of Cinderella story. So if you're not sure about Mansfield Park, or if you have read it and didn't really love it, I would actually recommend reading it alongside of the Literary Life podcast episodes that they did to go along with the chapters of Mansfield Park. Really fun, really enhanced my reading experience, and made me really appreciate what Jane Austen was doing with this book and the character of Fanny Price. I love it. It's just one of my favorites. Prompt number 5 comes from Jane Austen's Emma, and that is Mr. Knightley. And this is a book that convicted you or made you a better person. This is actually a book that I read in December of last year, and it convicted me so much that I made my 2025 Word of the Year Quiet, based off of this book. And that is Reclaiming Quiet, written by Sarah Clarkson. And the kind of tag or subtitle is Cultivating a Life of Holy Attention. And what I love about this book is she is a mother of 4, and I now think 5 very small young children. She is an author and a speaker, and she is married to the vicar of their church region, and so she's a pastor's wife basically and has all of the duties that goes along with that. And so for her to be writing and talking about a book, Reclaiming Quiet, in what must be a very noisy and busy life for her, was just something that was very attractive to me, because I know I need that in my life. I also have 3 very, very small children, but like Sarah Clarkson, I love to read and think, but it can be so hard to find the time or the discipline or even the right frame of mind to figure out how to make quiet happen so that you can do those things and think about God and just really be present in your life. And I'll be honest, this prompt made me realize that I'm not doing a very good job of that. I started the year off very strong with all of these intentions, and now that we're in July, I've just gotten really off track with quiet. So I may need to revisit this one, particularly before the new homeschool year starts. So this was a very convicting book that I obviously need to read again, but would highly recommend to you. Prompt number 6 is from Northanger Abbey, and that is, of course, Mr. Tilney. And this prompt is a book with playful or witty dialogue. Now, this book maybe isn't what most people would pick for this, but I couldn't really think of a book that I thought just had incredibly witty or playful characters, maybe one like Lizzie Bennet in Pride and Prejudice, but I didn't want to pick another Jane Austen book. But this book, for me, I love the relationship, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This still stands as my favorite book of all time. I love Jane's moral character and her virtue, but what I really love, even though Mr. Rochester in Jane Eyre is not perfect at all, we know he's got really bad communication skills if you've read it. What I love is kind of the undertone of their conversations that feels playful and witty without being in your face. I feel like they have a quiet understanding of one another, so not much necessarily has to be said between them, but when it is, it's really meaningful. I keep thinking about the scene where Jane Eyre needs to leave to go take care of her dying aunt, and Mr. Rochester knows that aunt was terrible to her, but he hasn't paid Jane yet for being the governess to his ward, and she kind of needs to come to collect some money from him so she can go on this journey. And that moment, they do have a really playful and witty banter that starts to show you that there is something there romantically. And I love it. I love their connection. There's a lot of things about Mr. Rochester that I don't love, but I love Jane Eyre, and I really love the way that their relationship builds up in the beginning. So if you haven't given this one a try, although it's a long one, this book might be particularly deceiving. It's so well worth it, and it is still one of my favorite classics of all time. And I should reread it probably this fall. So there's that. And speaking of rereading, that comes to our 7th prompt, which is from Persuasion. And of course, that is none other than Captain Wentworth. And this is a book you loved years ago that you would like to reread. And this is an obvious one that a lot of people probably have reread or do reread constantly, but it's just been a while for me. And that is, of course, Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. Harry Potter. It's Harry Potter. I read this book in 3rd grade for the first time, and then read the whole series as they were coming out. And then I read them again probably the first year before my marriage, during my marriage, just right before we had kids, I read it again. And I haven't been able to reread the series since, just because of littles. and I'm ready. I just feel the itch. The Literary Life podcast has episodes on their podcast for the first book, and they also have a class for all of the other ones to look at the Harry Potter series through a classical literature type lens, and that sounds like so much fun to me. However, I'm conflicted because I have a 6-year-old daughter. We've been reading aloud a ton of books, and I have some videos on my channel about the books we've read. And I think she could be really close to read and enjoy this one if I were to read it aloud to her. However, I think she still might need 1 or 2 more years. So do I go ahead and reread it myself and then just read it aloud to her again in a year or 2? Or do I just read it with her now? I don't know, I'm conflicted, but this one has been on my mind probably for the past year. I've just had the itch to reread it again, so we will see. Y'all stay tuned. And last, but certainly not least, especially in my eyes, because it comes from Mansfield Park, is Mr. Bertram. And this prompt is a book you almost DNF'd, but stuck through it, and it ended up redeeming itself in the end. Kelley came up with this prompt, and I just love it. I feel like that is so fitting for Mr. Bertram's character because we all know what he did to Fanny, and she probably should have DNF'd him, but I'm glad it worked out in the end. But for me, I don't know if this is considered cheating or not because it's technically a book I'm still working my way through, but I almost DNF'd it, and it's one of the only ones recently that I can think about that I've done that with. And that is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. If you have been following my channel this year, then you know I started this book in February. It's July and I'm still not done. Now, granted, there are 963 pages in this edition, and I am currently on page 715, so I'm not far from being done. However, this book started off great. I was hooked instantly, and for the first 25% of it, I was invested. I was like, oh, this is going to be a great book. And it is. It's just the pacing is very slow. It's a very thought-provoking and emotional book. It's not necessarily action-packed. I do like the parallel of characters. You have the immoral character of Anna Karenina, who is going on a social decline with her bad decisions, but you have the moral Konstantin Levin, who is rising up by making all of the right moral decisions, and I love that. But the middle got so slow that I thought, oh my goodness, this book is going to throw me in a reading slump. I should just stop. I should just stop it. I should just put it away and not worry about it because clearly I'm not liking it that much. However, I also thought to myself, you know what? That's the wrong frame of mind. I should just take it a little at a time as I feel the need to pick it up and read it. So that's what I've done instead. Instead of just completely DNFing the book, I just trudged my way through a little bit at a time when I felt like it, which is why it's taking me months to read it. And I'm glad I've stuck with it because now that I am probably near the last 25%, it's picking up for me again, and I am ready to pick this up once I finish up all of my Jane Austen July reads and finally wrap it up. So I will say I almost DNF'd it, but I'm glad I stuck with it because there's a lot of great thoughts and emotions in this book. I'll talk about it once I finish it, but I'm glad I have stuck with it. So that is it for the Jane Austen's Heroes tags. We have a prompt for each book and every male hero that we could think of. Please let me know in the comments below what some of your answers would be for this tag. As far as who I am tagging, just anybody. If you're participating in Jane Austen July and you want to talk about books within the context of Jane Austen, although they're not necessarily Jane Austen books, I'm tagging you in this prompt. I would also like to see Anne from In Search of Wonder do this tag. She might have already done the older tag that was similar to this one, but I loved her video on Jane Austen's heroines, so I would like to see what she would come up with for a prompt like this as well. And I will also be linking Kelley's from Bookish Kelley, her video for this original tag that we collaborated with. She came up with half of these prompts and hers were wonderful, and I can't wait for y'all to see what she had to say as well. So that is all for now. Lord willing, I will see y'all next time. Happy reading, friends, and happy Jane Austen July.